often do you go off and do something and you make a wrong turn? And you think, well, why did I do that? Well, the consequences of taking a wrong turn are what are at risk here in a movie of that name, which is MA rated, runs for 110 minutes, and I suppose it's best put this way. The movie amps up the consequences of taking a wrong turn. It's a horror thriller, and it keeps on coming at you until after the final credits start rolling. So please do not walk out of the cinema too soon. You've got 3 young professional couples. They decide to take a hike in the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. In fact, the Appalachian Mountains go over quite a number of states, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, they pack their belongings and off they head. And when they arrive in this sort of backwater town, they're not welcomed by the locals. In fact, their reception is positively frosty. There's an incident in a pub, and that does not aid their cause. And before they set off, they're warned not to deviate from the path while they're hiking. Of course they do. And that's when their real troubles begin. Because they encounter a cruel and secretive mountain cult known as the Foundation, led by an imposing figure called John Venable, played by Bill Sage. And this is a cult that dates back generations. They're self-sufficient, members live rudimentary lives, and they get around outside the walls of their enclosed compound in animal skins and skulls, looking particularly fearsome. Anyone who crosses them faces swift and barbaric punishment. And so it is that the hikers have unknowingly begun a journey to hell. Not all will come out alive. And when his daughter Jen, played by Charlotte Vega, doesn't phone or text him for 6 weeks, Scott, played by Matthew Modine, takes a drive to where she and the others were last seen. He is summarily dismissed by the local sheriff, then again by townsfolk when he starts showing around Jen's photo and asking questions. But he won't take no for an answer. He too has no idea what he's walked into. I mean, I'll start off by saying the backstory, modern kids making their way to a remote town, being ill-prepared for the fate that awaits them, even if that fate requires quite some leap of faith, I thought it was plausible, Greg. What did you think?
Yeah, it's an idea that's been done before. This is what I think the 7th film, sort of wrong turn, taking it in new directions there. It's certainly not a walk in the woods when Nick Nolte and Robert Redford went for a walk along the Appalachian Trail. The horror stuff is a bit gory at times, and this will appeal to those who sort of found Midsummer a little bit boring and a little bit dull. Certainly this one amps up the horror aspect of it there. I like the idea they had the couples were diverse. There was a gay couple, there was a mixed race couple and all that kind of stuff. And some of the gore here is quite effective. There were a couple of times when I had to look away from the screen, actually. That's how gory it is, and I've seen enough horror films. But it worked here for me, and as you said, Alex, it keeps going right up into the final credits there, which puts it in new directions as well. I thought the leader of the cult was a little bit sinister and nasty, and I thought the heroine was quite a feisty one as well, which you need in horror films at the moment. It worked for me, and yeah, it was a bit of a thrill ride.
Absolutely, it was. And Peter, I really liked the fact that you've got the movie eating into those final credits. I thought that worked very well. What about you?
Yes, it does. In fact, we don't even see the title of the film until the end of the film. Look, I had fears that this was going to be a typical genre eat-em-up, nasty, gory horror film, but in fact it subverted my expectations, and that's why I agree with Greg that it is somewhat similar to the film Midsummer, that sort of seething underlying horror based on the idea of two worlds colliding. This cult group, which is perhaps a very traditional fundamental group, which you could even make American political analogies with, and meeting modern-day people. Look, overall, I quite enjoyed it, actually. It's a pretty strong film, and certainly far better than the 6 earlier films in the semi-franchise of this wrong turn sort of type of filmmaking. So overall, I thought it was a pretty good film with some underlying political and social messages, especially by the time we reached the end of the film.
The only thing I was going to say, Dave, is that Midsummer was very much independent. This is a mainstream horror thriller, isn't it?
It is, and that's one of the things I find really interesting. I really enjoyed this film. I'm a big horror buff, and I really enjoyed the film, but I kind of felt that this was more a sequel to Midsummer than it was anything to do with Wrong Turn. It had no links to the original 6 Wrong Turn movies at all. In fact, the family who were the killers in the Wrong Turn movies were an incestuous, inbred redneck family that nothing like the guys in this film. So, and it's interesting, I interviewed Matthew Modine, the star of this film, this week, and he said the same thing. It's got no links to Wrong Turn at all. So I almost wonder if this would have worked better in the horror world if it had been a standalone film without the Wrong Turn tag put on it, because it seems to be a film that people are going along and really enjoying as a horror film, but Wrong Turn fans are walking away from it going, that's got nothing to do with the franchise that I love. So it's interesting how it's being received. But from a standalone horror film point of view, I really enjoyed it.
But does this not kick off a new... you get a reboot. That's how I viewed it. Is that not how you looked at it?
Well, they're calling it a reboot, but it's literally got no links to the old Wrong Turn films at all, which I find a bit weird.
Well, having said that, the script is by Alan McElroy, and he wrote the original at the start of the noughties. He wrote the original in 2003.
Yeah.
So, there's a link in terms of the writer. That's a pretty strong link, even if the treatment of the subject matter is decidedly different.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Greg. There's scenes of torment, violence, gore. They're integral to the offering. I mean, the acting, although it's hardly top shelf, it certainly gets the job done. And the star of the show, Jen, as played by Vega, she's given room to grow as the story unfolds. And to me, she was able to strike this balance between vulnerability, resolve, and strength. And that creepy music, I thought that worked really well. Stephen Lukács is responsible, adds to the feeling of foreboding that permeates the picture. Sure, it's far-fetched, but Wrong Turn keeps us, the audience, on a knife's edge, both literally and figuratively. So I reckon it works as well. Greg, score out of 10 for this movie, which is the reboot of a series of 6 that's called Wrong Turn.
I'm going to give it 7 out of 10 there. And you mentioned that the character of Jen, she reminded me a little bit of Katniss at times from the Hunger Games.
Yes, Katniss Everdeen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm giving it 7.
Good on you. What about you, Peter?
Yes, I agree with Greg. I think it's not a bad film at all, and I give it 7 as well.
Dave?
Yeah, I'm giving it 7, and I can't wait to see the sequel where that cult family raids Capitol Hill.
Now, I can't trump that.
Please, Greg, come on. Where's your dad joke coming out? All right, so I don't think since the 4 of us have got together in this COVID environment, we've ever had the same score for all of us, but this is a first. I'm giving it 7 as well. There we go. So, something must... all the stars have aligned. That's what we can say about this.